If you want to discover what God thinks about adultery and sexual immorality, get out your calculator. Open your New Testament at the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 1, verse 1, and start reading. Write down the number of times the author warns you against adultery, sexual lust, sexual temptation, and sexual immorality. When you are finished with Matthew, open the Gospel of Mark and continue your exercise. Do this through every book of the New Testament until you arrive at the last book, the book of Revelation, chapter 22, verse 21, the end of the Bible. What do you find? You discover that every author in the New Testament warns against sexual sin. Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Paul, James, Peter, Jude, even the anonymous writer of the book of Hebrews. They all warn you against sexual immorality. Some warn you more, some warn you less, but every author of the New Testament wants you to be warned. That tells you something, right? Now let's talk percentages. Have you considered that 81.5% of the books in the New Testament warn against sexual sin? Of the 27 books, a whopping 22 discuss adultery, sexual lust, sexual temptation, or sexual immorality in one way or another. And we're not just talking percentages here either, but every type of book. All of the Gospels, for example, mention adultery or sexual immorality, or both. The book that gives you a history of the early church, that's the book of Acts, warns against sexual immorality. Examine all the letters that Paul wrote to the churches, and you discover that he warned every church about sexual sin. Then consider the letters that Paul wrote to individuals. In every epistle but one, that's the letter to Philemon, Paul mentions sexual sin. Finally, look at the book that describes the end of the age, the book of Revelation. There, you guessed it, you find the sins of adultery and sexual immorality enumerated and warned against. Now, why do you suppose every author of the New Testament warns you against sexual sin? Why does every genre of book, gospel, history, letter, prophecy, caution you about sexual sin? Why does the New Testament warn every group of people? Jews, Gentiles, sinners, believers, churches, individuals, leaders, followers, people then, people now. Why does the New Testament warn against the sinfulness and divine consequences of adultery and sexual immorality? Because sexual purity is important to God. God's will for you is your sanctification. That's why he wants you to forsake pornography and masturbation. God cares about your sexual sin because God cares about you. That's clearly something God thinks is worth repeating.